So, hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the SaaS Sessions podcast. We have Kevin White on the show today. Kevin currently heads marketing at Retool. Retool is the fastest way to build internal tools. Like you can use the drag and drop building blocks and connect them to your database and APIs to build your own tools instantly. And it's part of the whole no-code revolution that's been going on. Previously, he was heading growth at Segment, which is one of the leading customer data platform. I don't need to introduce Segment, here. So, Kevin, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be on the show, and thanks so much for the introduction. I'm happy to share many things and be an open book for the audience here. So really excited to
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So today for the audience, like me and Kevin, we are going to talk about many companies hit growth plateau, right? At some point in their life cycle, right? And not once, but multiple times, right? Can happen for any company. Even if you are a fastest growing hyper growth stage company, you can still hit growth plateau on some channels or which stops your revenue and it's like plateauing, it's not growing. So we're going to talk on that in this episode. But before we do that, let's get to know more about Kevin and Retool. So Kevin, can you tell us more about yourself and then a little more on what Retool is?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I mean, I've been doing this kind of like growth marketing and marketing stuff for the last 10 years, at least in terms of SaaS, working at SaaS companies. So started off a very like junior role, was just kind of like thrown in. And at the time, the company I worked for was this company called Gigya. And they're like, we bought this tool called Marketo, figure out how to make it work. So I was kind of like thrown into the fire. And back then there was not so many like great resources like podcasts and lots of things written. So I just kind of like learned a lot by experience and built teams and built companies. And I was most recently at Segment for about 3 years and built out the team there and grew like crazy there. And Segment's a great company. And now I've joined Retool and to lead marketing, which is kind of scary. It's like I'm more on the demand gen side of things. So it's the PR and the brand and that kind of stuff is not like it's new to me, but it's something that I'll definitely have to learn and pull in the right people and tap into the right people who I've made connections with over the years. So I'm really excited for that. Really excited for Retool. We use Segment at Retool. So I've been
nice
in Segment, configuring things the way I want. So it's really, I'm really lucky and fortunate to be in my situation. So.
Yeah, being in the same ecosystem, right? And I think I did see Retool stack, technology stack, and I did see that they use Segment. So I think that's how you got to know Retool?
I think I was introduced to our CEO, David, a while ago, and then also a person who leads growth on the team. Her name is Jane. I met her at some networking like meetup thing. So I've been in touch with them for quite a long time, and the people at Segment definitely speak highly of Retool. And I just kind of saw the opportunity. Nice. I was like, oh, this is a great company, and decided to make a leap for it. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
That's really interesting. So can you tell us more on like this Retool and like how is it different? Like just as I was seeing as well, it's not like the other no code platforms out there. I think it's a bit different. So maybe you can tell us more on that.
It's not quite like the Airbases and the Bubble kind of tools out there, platforms out there. It's more built for developer engineering type of audience. And what it gets at is, every company has their own internal tools, whether they're using Excel spreadsheets or whether they're building something custom from scratch. And these tools do not get too much attention, or they're maybe not the highest priorities for engineers to build. So what's really great about Retool is like you can connect to your data sources like a DynamoDB or S3 or GraphQL or the APIs like GraphQL. And then we make it really easy to do like a drag and drop UI builder. So you don't have to fuss with all the like searching for React components and all this stuff that, a backend developer doesn't really want to be messing with. So it just really cuts the time to build an internal tool. And you don't have to also worry about people changing things in a spreadsheet and a Google sheet. It's going to mess up your whole default tool. So it's a really cool use case,
Yeah.
and something that I wasn't super familiar with before joining, but I really see the value in it now. It's cool. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's something that I see, which is like completely like different as well. I think it's not entirely no code. It's like a low code way to, like, drag and drop way. You can, but highly customizable as well, where you
Yeah,
can
yeah, it's
use
low
the
code.
existing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
low code, and it takes out the tedious things of coding that
exactly.
you
Yeah.
really want to be taking a lot of time to work on. So yeah,
Definitely.
but it's great to
I
be
don't
part
think
of that groundswell. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think any tool is no code, right? Like, even if the user is not coding, but at the end there's some code which is applied, right? So if you see, like, I don't believe that any tool is actually no code tool, right? It's just that at the end user does not have to code anything. Maybe that's why it's all like called up as no code like platform or no code tool. But in the end, in the back end, like, if you see, if you where the magic happens, that happens via code itself, right? So someone has to code, not the end user, but someone in the end has to code.
Oh yeah, yeah, and like the evolution of all of the no code things is just like kind of like all these abstraction layers that keep on like
Yeah,
building on themselves, and that's kind of like now where we're at. It's like,
yeah,
now you can kind
yeah,
of do things with the UI, and if you have your API credentials and plug them into this UI, then
yeah.
it kind of works. And there's definitely a lot of code on the back end that
That
the platform is
happens.
offering, and then people are
Yeah.
building that is happening. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if you saw this recent trend on Twitter about GPT-3. I mean, that's really amazing. I mean, if anyone doesn't know what GPT-3 is, I also don't know a lot, but I just saw it trending on Twitter. So you just type what you want, and then this platform or this technology, it kind of builds the code as you type. So you type in a way that, hey, you want a website and you want a blog with a search bar and with two buttons, and there should be like some space between them, and those buttons should be gray in color, and they should have like a shadow or something, and you type that, and this technology kind of converts whatever you type into like a code, and then it kind of actually builds the code and gives you the output. I mean, I mean, that's
Yeah.
really something which is trending. I mean, you should definitely check it out. It's really
Yeah.
interesting.
It's crazy to see how many advances we've made in terms of like I say like I've been part of it. I have no idea how this stuff works,
Yeah.
but just like with the NLP and with machine learning and all that stuff is, it's really come a long way. It's cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, talking like, coming back to the growth side of things, where, where we can talk we, and we both are like, we play in. So yeah, talking about growth plateau, right? Like, let's start off by understanding, like, what's a growth plateau? I mean, what happens in the growth plateau, and
Yeah.
what is it
Yeah.
really?
I think the way that I like to see it or envision it is like, I know that there's all these like success stories out there of like, oh, this company, like Slack, for instance, had like this hockey stick growth, and it's just like up into the right exponential growth. And if you like zoom in on that type of growth a little bit, you'll see that it looks actually more like an S curve. And that's just because with natural or with growth like that, you eventually tap out the channel or the way that you're growing, and then that kind of results in a tableau, like a flattening out of the curve, and then it's kind of up to the people in the org or the startup to figure out like how to continue growing. So, at some points you'll see this kind of like flattening of growth, and you have to figure out new things to do to grow the company. So, that's kind of how I like to think of it. Is like a lot of people imagine like, you just have this exponential growth, but in reality, there's a lot of things going on within an organization where you have to really figure out how to continue growing, because sometimes your channels or mechanisms for growth stall out a bit. So, yeah.
Totally. I mean, yeah. You definitely want to hit growth plateau on this current pandemic, but not your company. Yeah. And talking about like how does like a company end up in a growth plateau, right? Like, because teams or growth teams or marketing teams, everyone is trying to grow their channels or their part of things constantly, right? Like, everyone is working towards it. You're hiring new people, you're doing like a bunch of new activities, but you end up like, there are many companies like who end up sometime, not for a long time, maybe 1 quarter, 2 quarters, something like that, but you still end up being in like you still plateau it out. So like how does a company like end up in this kind of plateau? And
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of ways you'll hit growth plateaus, and I've certainly experienced hitting a good amount of growth plateaus in my day. So, I think at first, especially like starting out, you might have you might be reaching an audience that hasn't like crossed the chasm yet, or you haven't crossed the chasm yet with your audience, where it's like you're when you're starting out, like the people who are adopting your products are very much in like the early experimentation kind of like innovator stage. And, maybe you exhaust that audience where it's like there's only so many people who are going to tinker and put up with bugs and things like that. And then you need to polish your product. And that's when you need to like kind of move upstream to like the earlier adopters and not the innovators like stage of that, like crossing the chasm.
Got it.
So there's kind of things like that where, where your audience is kind of tapped out and you need to like reach a new audience and find product market fit within a different audience. There's also things like, maybe your initial acquisition strategy or your growth strategy was around paid acquisition, and your paid acquisition channels are no longer, efficient anymore, and you need to figure out other mechanisms for growth. So it varies all across the board, but eventually plateaus are hit and you can only scale so much. And when you get to a really big size, it's hard to keep doubling. So, but happy to elaborate more on things or to continue, drilling in on this interesting topic. So,
yeah, definitely. I mean, like my next thing would be like, how do you see the indicators, right? Like, as you rightly said, like it can be on broad, it can be multiple channels, it can be one channel. So it's really happening like all over the place, right? And data is constantly moving, right? You guys are like capturing data on like 100 different sources and through multiple channels. So it's really hard to like identify which channel is gonna maybe hit a plateau, right? So what are some of the like what can I say, like indicators that you can spot on, right? Like particular to, let's say, one or two channels, and where you can see if these indicators are happening, that means you're going to hit a plateau. So what are like good indicators that you can identify, and you can stop this kind of hitting this plateau, and maybe change the levers very early as to change this, maybe changing it like 3 or 4 weeks later while you're already on a plateau. So how do you identify these indicators?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to like the fundamentals of understanding how your funnel or like your growth loops, to use like a Brian Balfour kind of term, is how the mechanics of these things work.
Yeah.
And if you have a good grasp of like, okay, maybe my early indicator is site traffic, and I know that like my site traffic, like my mechanism for growth is maybe like organic search, and we hit on all of the high intent keywords, or maybe they're just like not that much search intent anymore, and you're getting into like more abstracted things like higher up in the awareness phase, and you're maybe keep increasing traffic at the same rate, but that traffic doesn't have the same intent to purchase your product. So if you have, these are kind of like, that's one example of an early indicator, but the way that would manifest itself is like looking at your data. So you would be able to see at a pretty early stage in this scenario where, we got all this traffic, but that traffic didn't make its way down the funnel like we expected. So therefore, this is kind of a risk. Like maybe we should start looking at other channels, because SEO, lower intent SEO is not really working. So these are all kind of like, this is kind of like a way to identify these kind of like early indicator risk factors to your growth.
I think I could think of two different things, right? One is like plateau affecting like multiple levels in the funnel, right? You're getting those traffic, but you're getting those form fills, but eventually they are not converting. So maybe the traffic that you're attracting is not good. So that like it happens across funnels, right? The one way to identify, and that what makes it hard to identify as well, because by the time you end up on the third or fourth stage, you're already done like multiple experiments at the first stage or top of the funnel, and which kind of pulls or boils down to the later stages. So I think that's still late. And then secondary, talking about metrics, right? So I think just tracking one or two, or like the primary metrics for any stage or any channel, right? So that won't be enough. I think like you should track like primary metrics, secondary metric, and tertiary metrics. And I think tracking all these different levels of metrics, and you see there is any change or anomaly happening in like on all these levels of metrics, and maybe that's a good way to identify. What do you think?
Yeah. I have a couple of thoughts there, because it's a lot to kind of talk about. So,
Yeah.
the way that I and teams that I work with typically try and approach things is we have this like North Star metric of like,
Got it.
maybe it's like an activation metric. Maybe it's like, it's something that's predictable further down the funnel. So like generally my teams are working like higher up the funnel, where we're working on more like activation, or acquisition is even higher than that. Activation. So we have some sort of metric that's like, if we can deliver this metric and we set the right criteria for it, if it's like, if you consider it like a marketing qualified lead, or like a product qualified lead or something like that, as long as that metric like is pretty predictably converts down the funnel, like that's maybe where you stop on the marketing growth side of things. Is like, okay, I'm delivering this metric that is meaningful and predictable. That's like where you want to get to. And then, like, to your point, there's a lot of like early indication metrics before that. And that's where, to your, like you said, it's good to like map out all these different kind of like milestones within your customer journey and have a really good grasp of your customer journey. Because before someone activates in the product, they need to sign up for the products. And before they sign up for the product, they need to like know about your product and visit your website. So there's all these things that are definitely like happening, and probably even micro metrics that are happening in between those other things too. So you can really drill down into this stuff and understand it. But I think the one other thing I wanted to mention, related to tracking metrics and early indicators, is that this is something where cohort analysis can really, really help out.
Yeah.
You have your different cohorts. Maybe it's cohorts by week or day or whatever kind of like whatever time window you want to look at. And then you can see like, oh, we did this experiment. We tried this new channel this week. And we noticed that our conversion rates further down the funnel are looking great or looking really bad. Like, what did we do that week? What experiments did we run? And as long as you're documenting what you're doing, and can go back and look at the data, then you have a better point of view in terms of like, oh, we did this and it resulted in this, this output.
Got it.
Do more or do less of this kind of thing. So that's, I don't know. I kind of word vomited a lot there, but that's kind of like how,
no, I think it makes sense, right? Yeah, seeing a cohort and like figuring out what just attributing like what kind of things that you did in that particular week, and seeing how it boils down to the next couple of weeks, or maybe 3-4 weeks or 6 weeks, how much a bigger cohort that you're tracking. But yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, just to track back and see what's going wrong, and that would be a good way to identify, or to spot on these identifiers which are leading on to like a plateau or something like that. So yeah, talking about your experience at hitting a growth plateau, right? Like we talked before, and you said you hit it like a few times, and while you were at Segment. So can you give us more on like what was that, and what channels for that, and maybe we can talk later on how did you overcome it?
Yeah, yes, for sure. So Segment has gone through a various amount of growth plateaus. Before my time, one really interesting one that I think people kind of forget about is growing through pricing. And I know before I joined Segment, we had pretty steady growth, but not like that exponential growth. And then we were able to work on a way to price per value. We call it monthly tracked users. I think is like their MTU is like bill on. And by connecting that like value with our pricing, that actually was something that really helped us grow. And this is before my time at Segment. So I just want to throw that out there, because like you don't need like traffic and conversion are ways to grow, or increasing activation are ways to grow. But then also pricing is a pretty interesting mechanism to look at for growth. So I just wanted to like say that to you. And then when I was at Segment, we had a lot of inbound leads, traffic, signups, all that kind of stuff. And really, I came in and used a combination of paid acquisition to continue to grow that, plus like optimization within the sales and people who are on the front lines, like fielding like these inbound leads, people who are raising their hand saying they want a demo, or they're trying something out. So that really, we were kind of this like growth at all costs mindset, which a lot of people were in like the 2018, early 2019 timeline. And then, the public markets started like looking at things a bit more differently. And they're like, oh, well, you have to have efficient growth. You can't just like spend at all costs. And we really had to pull back quite a lot on our paid acquisition and budget. So that definitely flattened out the curve quite a bit. But it also helped us out as a company to like be more rigorous about, what we're spending on and how we're growing. So we were able to pull back budget quite a bit and keep the volume flat or the same, but that's still a growth plateau that we. So the thing that we turned to after that was really focusing on more of like an outbound motion, or I say outbound, but it was actually a bit more of like looking at these like signals that people are giving us, people on our website, people registering for webinars, or doing things in the product that are more on like the self-service side of things, and like looking at these signals and sending and like providing a structure to surface those signals to our sales team so that they can follow up. These people aren't necessarily like raising their hand, but they are showing some interest. And that is what has been, at least just before I left, what has been like helping to continue that growth where we're hitting some sort of plateaus. So yeah, I think, there's things that, aren't always that obvious, where it's like, I think people go a lot to like, oh, I'm going to drive a lot more traffic. I'm going to double my traffic, but doubling your traffic is costly. And then a lot of times when you do that, when you pay for it, it doesn't convert down the funnel the same way. So looking internally at what optimizations could be had, like how can we enable our team that's like our customer success team, our onboarding team, our sales team, how can we enable them to activate customers more easily, or like do their jobs in a more efficient way? Like that goes a long way in terms of like continuing to grow the company. So, it all depends on your actual use case, but that was kind of my experience at that segment. So, yeah.
Totally. And that's really great. And I think you would have had a good challenging, it would be like a challenging experience, and it would be much more fun, like, solving for it as well. I can imagine. And then how did you overcome it? Like, what are some of the like actions that you took in like, overcoming this plateau that you were hitting maybe on some channels?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first action to take is to look at your data, look at those cohorts and be like, okay, well, this from this metric, from like a visit to sign up metric, for example, looks fine. But then from sign up to an opportunity created or to someone becoming a paying customer, it looks like it drops off quite significantly. So looking at that to identify the gap, and then like kind of drilling in a little bit there and like understanding like, okay, what's actually happening? Like put yourself in the shoes of the user and understand like what the intentions of what the user is doing, whether they're signing up or whether they're like getting stuck activating the products. And then from there you can kind of like focus on like, how to improve that experience, how to move that metric the right direction. So a lot of it is around like user empathy, or like understanding the frame of mind that the user's in when they're taking these actions. And then I guess like to make an example of like how we use that at Segment, some of the things that we were surfacing to the team are when someone is in a Segment workspace and they're inviting their teammates. Well, they're not just inviting their teammates because they want to like hang out with them on Segment. They're inviting their teammates because they want them to like maybe add a new destination or connect something or build audiences. There's some reason for that. So if we can reach out to that person and ask like, hey, why did you invite this person to your workspace? Is there something we can help out with? It helps us make that customer more successful. And then just by way of doing that, you grow the company as well, or you grow like your revenue as well. So yeah, it all kind of goes hand in hand, I think.
Yeah, I think translating it to like, having new user acquisition versus upselling or expanding your existing customer base. I think, figuring what to do when you're on a plateau, that I think that kind of helps in a way as well. In the case where.
Yeah, on the product side, on the product side, that's definitely another lever you can pull, which is, you can grow based on usage, but it's not always so easy to grow based on usage because it's kind of dependent on the success of your customers. So, I mean, hopefully your product is helping your customers be successful and they're growing, but then also, you can build other products that help service that customer and that tie into your core product, and then sell them on that product as well, or maybe add enterprise features that they're looking for. There's lots of ways that you can grow using the product as well. Expansion and upsell. Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, for Segment, like if they use the product more, if they have more MTUs, that means their like Segment is billing them more, right? Because it's based on per MTU kind of billing. So I think in a way that's a great way. And and when you earlier said like, growth at all cost mindset, I think you had that at Segment, and then you stopped doing that, and then you focused on to like effective growth mindset, right? So like why the shift, and what according to you is like not working out in the growth at all cost mindset?
Yeah. So the shift is mostly driven by actually looking at your core like SaaS metrics. And this is things like, what is your magic number? What is your, a lot of people are familiar with like the customer acquisition costs to LTV or your payback period, like looking at these metrics. And, I feel like a lot of people get look at those metrics and they're like, oh, I spent this much on, this Google campaign or this Facebook ad or whatever, and it drove this much revenue, but they don't actually look deeply into all of the fully burdened costs of acquiring a new customer. Things like your sales team overhead, customer support, all these types of things, and time to like close a new deal or to get a new self-service customer on board. Like there's a lot of overhead that goes into that. So looking at like a fully burdened cost, we realized, we weren't quite in the place where we wanted to be, and wanted to tighten that up a little bit, because, to be prepared for like the public markets and be a public company, you can't, especially in today's day and age, you need to eventually have some earnings or a path to having earnings. You can't really have earnings if you're spending more than you're putting back into the company. So it's just basic like this kind of stuff that we looked into. And we're like, we should clean this up a little bit, because we're confident that like the LTV will be there, but we also want to spend in the right way. And I feel like a lot of things happened in that time period, like the whole WeWork debacle kind of made people like, oh, but this company is valued a lot, but then pulled back quite a bit when they looked into the details, and we just wanted to make sure we were good in that sense.
Totally. I think that really is a great perspective to look at at this particular thing, right? Like growth at all cost mindset, and having a more effective growth kind of mindset, where you're like having an effective growth, which kind of boils down to the revenue part as well. Because at the end of the day, all metrics in the end, like revenue is the best metric to have, right? Like if
you want a business, I think so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I think we have reached the course for this episode on talking about like growth plateau and stuff. I mean there's a lot to talk on, but I think it's very hard to put back in all this great stuff from you in like 25-30 minutes episode. But I mean we could I hope we did all that. But yeah, have a few lightning questions before we call it
Yeah.
off. Yeah, these are not related to growth or growth plateau or something like that. It's just generic questions. Yeah. So first one, yeah. So Kevin, what do you know about your work now that you wish you would have known when you first started?
Yeah. So a lot of this comes down to like the basic principles of marketing. It's a good
Uh-huh.
question. I feel like to really simplify marketing is really just to understand who your audiences are, who your audience is. I
Uh-huh.
should make it singular, and then know what problems they have and how your offer addresses those problems. And if you can just get
Uh-huh.
those two things right, like you'll be in really great shape. So just like those like first principles of marketing and like having customer empathy are things I wish I knew, rather than trying to do like copy, like A/B tests that aren't going to make any difference. So yeah.
Totally. And yeah, second one. So what did your biggest professional failure teach you?
Biggest professional failure. I think it's just teaching you that things are going to be okay even if you fail.
Uh-huh.
I Not to get too deep into like a story, but when I was at my first company, I accidentally emailed our whole entire database
Uh-huh.
with some outbound message, and I
Oh.
felt awful and miserable. And it ended up being just fine. People responded. We created a lot of opportunities, and like even if I had failed and sent a blank message or something, like everything would have been okay. So I think just learning that like failure is okay and dealing with
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
learn early. Yeah.
You have to keep going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So what's the number one thing that has helped you shorten your learning curve?
Uh, so I read and listen to a lot of things and consume so much content, but um, doing that only gets you so far. Like actually getting your hands dirty and uh,
Uh-huh.
doing things is what helps you
Yeah.
learn the most. So that's like the number one thing is like, yeah, you can read all the blog posts you want, but unless you actually like do something, you're not going to learn all that quick. So I would say just get out there and do stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think practical implementation over theoretical knowledge anytime, right?
Or if you get
That's
theoretical knowledge, like put it to practice. Like
yeah,
you
that's
got
all.
to.
That's really great. And my last one, right? So I mean, like, I want to know, like, what are you gonna do once this whole pandemic is over? Like, what's the first thing that you want to do that you
Oh, I
had
need to
planned
travel.
to do in all of this time, and you canceled on that, and maybe you were like waiting for that one thing that to do like after this whole pandemic is over.
Yeah, just travel in general. Like all of my
Yeah,
travel plans are gone, and like I
yeah,
love traveling and exploring new cultures and especially
uh-huh.
exploring new cuisines. So in art and all that kind of stuff. So I miss that a ton, and I want to go somewhere overseas.
I think everyone, this travel industry is gonna like boom like crazy once this whole pandemic is over, because everyone will be bored sitting at home, and then suddenly this thing is over, and then boom, like in 2-3 months, like all the travel destinations are full and
I
hotels are
know.
booked, and
I hope
and the
so. I hope it
prices
can
are
all
soaked up.
recover. Yeah, I really hope so. I think so. For me, I'm definitely going to do that once I can. So
Awesome, awesome. So yeah, thanks a lot, Kevin. This has been a very insightful conversation about like growth plateau and how to overcome one, how to spot one, and yeah, it's really great in like talking with you about this.
yeah, it was really fun. I loved having conversations. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Great.